Dharma. And so, I had signed up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't obviously, I had inclinations, but I didn't know the massivity of it at the
Yeah.
time. And now I've learned more about it.
Well,
But
and probably for the best too, because
mhm,
it's one of those things where, again, we've kind of discussed this off mic or whatever, but we don't know when we're out there. Like, we don't have that sense of what the human emotions are going to be with this. We've been living in a bliss state in this, other dimension for who knows how many, human years, because time is non-existent. So it's just you're there for a long, long time. You don't remember, and I feel that yes, our memories come back, when we are done with this plane and we move on. But I don't think that we also just remember. I don't think we have a way to remember the human emotions, the physicality of it. I don't think that we have a way as a soul to touch back into that. And so when we make these decisions, they are they're not attached to what this is really going to feel like when I'm down there. What they're attached to is like, this is a job that needs to be done. Like, we're up here, we see this energy, we see where the earth is going, we see all these people that are not going to get from A to B unless they have a little bit of a help or a push. And it's like, okay, I sign up to help all these people get through this. But I don't think that you have any kind of understanding up there, or even care, if you do have an understanding of it, how that's going to feel when you're down here. So it gets real intense when you're down here, right?
I think that it depends on the dimension you're in too, like how intense
Mm-hmm.
it is, because
Yeah.
they've talked about, like the higher dimensions, they see the emotions, but it's more logic to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's more like, okay,
Exactly. Yeah.
this darkness has to happen for this to get to this light. And it's like
Right. It's
the
very like
pain
by the
is here
book
nor there.
almost. Is
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah. It's
it's
like, this
not
is
that
what I have to do to
they,
get this done without the
yeah,
attachment of the emotion that we have here. Yeah,
it's,
yeah, for sure.
it's kind of the way it was described when I read it was like kind of like we're case studies. You know what I mean? They're in
Yeah.
awe as to how like we feel bad when we don't please someone else. And so they want to see that
Yeah.
wiring. And for every single person, if you feel bad for not pleasing somebody and I feel bad for not pleasing somebody, our wiring is different.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's what they're like. They're looking at the infinite ways that,
Infinite. Yeah. It's
yeah,
like
that
each
we
of
can
us
be
being that little
wired.
bit different from the
Exactly.
next one over can have
Yeah.
that same experience completely differently, which we kind of touched on in our episode on personal experience. But yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's the point of it all in a sense. But I think I agree with that it's very much what needs to get done here. Boom, 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 boom. These are the things we do. Like, very, not to take the magic and everything out of it, because it's so magic in that state that it's like you don't need to put any extra magic in it. But it's very much like a manual or like a blueprint of like, this is, karmic patterns. Think of them as like sacred geometry, as like a shape that you're going and you're picking out this shape and you're overlaying it on your pattern, and you're going to run this overlay of karmic shapes for your life. And that's what it's like up there, right? And it's like, this one will be fun, it's like this one has this many experiences, and this one has, and you could like, experience points or whatever you want to like call it, just to get your head around it. But you're picking them out based on these experience points, or these things that you being everything, being all of us, want to experience. And it's all different things. So it's you being individual, picking out these other patterns that maybe other people are running, putting them all on top of each other, making a whole new thing, and then boom, all these new experiences. And it's just not about whether they're going to be horrible experiences. It's not about whether it's going to be like, oh my God, like I had a, crappy childhood. And then, like the people that are out there experiencing real suffering right now with wars and things like that. Like, they didn't go in saying, I want to experience a war, but it was a different experience. And so it's really difficult to talk about it in that way and say, yes, we chose this, but everyone chose to have these experiences, like we would choose a game.
Very much so. Yeah, no. And
So like
yeah.
the higher self, to bring it back, because I of course went on a
Well,
tangent,
no, but
but to bring it back, like,
that's
yeah,
where you're right. Communing with the higher self makes it you more aware of that. So it's like you still
mm-hmm,
have compassion for that person and those
mm-hmm,
people and what they're going through. But it's also about like the more you're in tune with your higher self, the more you're communing, the more you're not feeding that pendulum. You
right,
know what I mean? Like,
yes,
and so therefore we're anchoring in a new type of consciousness. We're not, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like we're no longer feeding a war-based pendulum of fear and,
right,
gluttony and things like that. And instead
yeah,
we're in, and instead we're feeding a pendulum where it's like we just don't believe in it. We don't want it to exist anymore.
Yeah, we don't want it to exist anymore, but I think it's important to say, you know, with the pendulum, that we're not trying to say it's not happening. It's not like stepping outside of the swing of the pendulum isn't saying this isn't a real thing that's happening. It's just saying I'm not going to get sucked in by the emotions, by the fear, by those frequencies that this is producing. I'm not
Oh
going to
yeah,
go down
no. I
that
mean,
road.
yeah,
Yeah.
if that came out in anything that I said or that
No,
kind of
yours didn't so
context.
much. I just think people in general kind of have a little misconception with that when we talk pendulums. I've just seen kind of online, you know, comments and things like that. And I think some people hear pendulum and think spiritual bypassing, like, oh, if you're not, you know, on the pendulum, you're kind of, you're, you know,
You're
pretending
not,
this
no,
isn't
you're
real.
not spiritual
And it's
bypassing. You're just not
right,
feeding the energy
exactly.
that is
Yeah,
feeding that. It's like y the fact that it exists shows the fact that there is a pendulum swinging. Like
right.
it can't
Yeah,
exist if there's not a pendulum swinging to begin with. But it's a matter of what kind of pendulums do you want to feed.
right.
And that's where, it's like I don't like I watch the news. I stay very up to date with what Zelensky is doing, and
Yeah,
in uh all personal attributes and characteristics, I think he's a fabulous man. I think he
like a
is
hero, you know,
I
like a
think
modern day
that
hero
well, I
in
think
many
he
ways.
is part of I think his job is to raise consciousness. And I
Yeah.
think he's doing a good job of it. And then I also think
And
that
also a man who has lived many lives, like in that sense as well, like had those such a varied experience, which I don't know, to me lends credence to the being here to raise vibration in so many different ways, from
oh,
being
I
an
mean, very
actor to being a
possible, yeah.
singer to being a like, you know, prime minister, president. I'm not, sorry, not sure, and then, you know, fighting in a war and things like that, leading a country. How many lives, you know, how many roles to live
Well, I
in order
mean,
to raise.
that's well, we don't really. I mean, yeah, that's a rabbit hole to dive down because he could have literally just lived lives in every single war and realized
Right,
what
that's true
not to
too.
do. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
sorry,
that
I was
kind of.
thinking just in
No,
this life,
yeah.
but yes,
Oh, yeah.
you're right.
Okay, this
Yeah.
life. That's why I was like, you said past lives, so I was like, wait a
Sorry,
minute, are
no,
we gonna go
no.
down that rabbit hole?
Uh,
Like,
no, but that's possible too. Like, and the opposite, right? Someone who had lived a very quiet life, just as you have,
exactly,
and been
yeah.
like, I didn't do much, and then went back up and was like, oh man, like, you know, that was easy, sure, but that's not what, you know, I want to do. So next time I'm going to dive in and do all the things, right,
Well,
and put all
yeah.
those on top of each other. But I think that's really interesting that the pendulum came up, because I think that ties back to the higher self very well, in the sense that I think the higher self has such a grasp on when you're going to get sucked up in that swing, when you're going to be feeding that, and really really leads you away from it. And it does it in a way that's just so visceral to me anyway, where it's like your energy is gone. Like I can't even look at my screen because it's like, no, like your eyes are closing, like you're not going to look at this. Like I think a lot of times when it comes to that energy, at least for myself, that's where I really notice that higher self almost take the wheel in many instances. If I really kind of settle into it and I say, okay, like, you know, I'm going to just feel my body and feel what my body wants me to do and really listen to that right now, I feel like that's when that higher self takes over and is like, no, no more of this. Or, you know, you get a nauseous response, or you get, you know, these things that you really can't ignore, right?
No, I agree. Yeah. I know that for me, the pendulums that tend to feed are my own.
Yeah,
In
in
my
your own
own
life, it's so
creation,
much,
like the
yeah,
traumas and things like that. And it's not that I'm feeding them, it's that as I'm healing them, I have to face them. So it's like I have to acknowledge the fear, I have to acknowledge the anger, I have to dissipate it. You know what I mean? So I have to stop that pendulum. I have to literally like take that pendulum out of creation and
right,
and I don't know how I feel about replacing it with a pendulum because my understanding is that as long as pendulums exist, pendulums I guess exist only in our dimension. So the whole point is to
right,
kind of take away pendulums. You know what I
right.
mean? Like
Because yeah,
and
it's
just
polarity,
be
it's
and just
duality, it's
be. You know
part
what I
of
mean?
that.
Like yeah. So if the
Hmm.
pendulum is literally like has nowhere to swing, then we're just being and we're just
Yeah.
there in center. Um,
And then we
but
wouldn't be here, because yeah, like you say, it has to be swinging, or some has to be swinging in this current dimension. And what we can
well,
do here is sit above it and watch it, but we can't eliminate it completely. Maybe from
well,
within
I
our
think
own
that's
lives
for
though, but that's what you're
debate.
saying. Yeah.
Just because speaking of my reading Astro Card Oracle yesterday, which that is Shannon all the way. I definitely promote that on this episode as well. If you haven't, you should do it because it's amazing. But speaking of, I could debate that because apparently I like to debate things, which is
Yes.
not a lie at all. What were you just saying? Because I totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, like whether or not the pendulum can, you know, cease
Oh,
to exist.
so for ascension, for us to ascend, which it is raising dimensions, you're right? But at the same time, like, to know a peace on earth that we truly see, that we have the visions of, you know, with the recovery centers, with the communities, all of that kind of stuff, it's really like we can exist without the pendulums. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Okay.
about, like, because then we're just being. I'm not saying that pendulums, I'm not saying that we have a better gain on pendulums. I'm not, like, in this dimension, you're probably right. There's always a ability for a pendulum to be created. But
Or like just to be swinging very softly. Like this is what I wonder because I totally see where you're coming from too, and I like that. And I like, you know, looking at the new world and what's that going to look like with our smaller communities and like very harmonious living. But are we saying that, you know, as we heal, and let's say we're at this stage with this communal living where we've done step work with kids since they were really young, and we've done lots of work with those who needed to be healed. And let's say we're looking at like a very low, if any, instance of addiction and depression and things like that that are really, you know, the rampant kind of issues that we're facing today that just make it kind of impossible to not have that up and down. Would we still be here? Would that still be Earth if we were that harmonious that we didn't have any up and down, like any bad and
I think
good?
that's when we ascend. I think that's
Right.
like when, I
So
think
then
that's
it's
when the
not here
planet
anymore.
ascends. It's
Yeah.
still here. The Earth is still, like, but it's not in 3D anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
That's when
it's
it's
going to
4D or
be in a
5D.
different, it's going to be in a higher dimension. Obviously, I think it's like 7, 8 is where it ends up
Okay.
going, because I think
Wow.
6, I think you can't surpass, my understanding is that you can't surpass 6 and still be in a human, like, still be in
I
like
agree with that. That's
this,
what I've heard. Yeah.
like,
They're not
you know what I
heard.
mean? Like, yeah, you can't,
Research,
7,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 60 is where, well, I've heard slash read slash whatever channelings and things both. That 60 is where it breaks off. So 60 is the last stage that you could have a body, you could be physical, but you don't have to. So 60 is where it's like some may choose not to, and most do choose to be formless because form is difficult and dense and hard and all these things, like as we know from having these human bodies and having to keep them alive on a daily basis, like it's not always very much fun. But yeah, my understanding is 60 is where that breaks off.
Mhm.
And then 70 is just, to my understanding, like where there's, you know, that just thought, you know, like so much so that it's not necessarily like you'd look around and be like, oh, there's another formless being, so much as you just be part of the all and not, you know, and just dreaming.
7
almost,
is?
like dreaming. That's my, from what I, and again, like all these dimensional things, like some people look at that there's only 9 dimensions and some
You're
are
right.
13.
Yeah, it does
And there's
depend.
so many different ways to do it, but kind of collecting that information together, it seems to be the general consensus, regardless of whether you see it in 9 or 13 or whatever, that 6 is where we form, no form, choice, whatever. And that's like the big creation dimension. Like that's the creator dimension where it's like we can really look at everything as a whole and be like, what do we want to create that doesn't exist yet? What worlds, you know, do we want to look at? Like those kind of things. And then 7D, from my understanding, is very much that's why I like that heaven on earth or that seventh heaven thing comes up, that it's just very, and I can't really describe it properly because I don't think we can really, like, you know, put ourselves in that place from where we are right now. It's so different from the physicality of earth, but just being in bliss and imagining everything and the
Well, see,
imagination of everything without having to experience it.
and I agree with you in some context, but I have a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
different, like, perspective of it. I feel
Sure.
like, yeah, we ascend and the planet goes up to where it can, like, see other realms and, you know,
Yeah,
commune with other
join the
realms.
galactic community, kind
Yeah,
of.
and things like
Yeah.
that. But that
Mm-hmm.
does not mean that we participate in being part of the all. Like, my understanding, it's like the different councils. So the all is like a council, like, you know, what is the law of one?
Right.
That is all about the all, and that is its own, like, it even says whenever you're listening to it, like, this is not everyone, this is a certain council, like the Council of Light is, you know, a council that you're familiar with. They're different councils. So even though the concept that we all exist together and that we all, you know, are in this mind, you know what I mean, that we're all in this mind, it doesn't necessarily mean that we function as being
Mm-hmm.
all. You know what I mean? Like that kind
Right.
of that's my perspective is like, yes, seventh is heaven. I do agree with that 100%. I do believe that, the planet ascends, we get to, participate and throw parties with the other dimension or, with the other planets, and, Arcturians can come visit us. We can go visit them, like all of that fun stuff. But yeah, I do believe that the councils are still there, the separation, because it just the cosmic disclosure, not cosmic disclosure, but uh, the show that we like on Gaia where it's the channeling show. Um,
Um, Channeling
ED, extra
dimensionals.
dimensionals.
I wanted to
Yes.
say terrestrials.
So,
I'm like, that's not that.
so even
Yeah.
them, they're like, some of them are in sixth dimension on other planets, and it's like,
Yeah.
they're not, they don't like their main thing in life is to live their life and have, whether it's their
Right.
children and to,
Like in harmony
commune.
and
Yeah, exactly. So I think
yeah.
the understanding is much more there, but the participatory, or where you are in service to the universe, because we're
Yeah.
all in service to the universe. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like it
It's
doesn't
where we need to be at that time too.
exactly.
I don't know if you believe this, but I do that we are higher dimensional than 3D.
Oh, for sure.
We are, living in these 3D bodies, and we're doing that. But I don't believe that our souls are the lower dimensionals, or maybe they are right now. I don't know how you categorize that based on what's the instance at the now moment. But we've also experienced higher
Well,
dimensional living
oh,
many
for
times.
sure. I
Yeah.
agree with you 100%. And I think that a lot of us as incarnated here are those higher dimensional beings in our higher
Right.
self. You know what I mean?
I
Like some
agree
of
with
us
that.
are very capable of, some of us are in whatever dimension you believe is the higher dimension, could technically, very well be 11, 12, 13. Not, I don't, 13. It just
Yeah,
depends on
so
what you
when do you
believe.
think you hit the one? When do you think you hit this thing,
Excuse me.
the all, the one only,
For me,
the
that's
one
like
mind?
13. For me,
13.
in my
Okay.
mind, the way that I see it, but I can see that that is, it's transforming. It's always growing. You know what I mean? Like, but this cycle that I'm going
Mm-hmm.
through is another mystic cycle. So at the end of it, I'll meet the all in another form. So it's like I've met the all
Right.
in God form. I've met the all in creator form. I've met the all in divine form. You know what I mean? Like the different names that it
Mm.
goes by are different characteristics of it and how I meet it.
I like
And
that. I
so,
like
and
that.
that's what I call the mystic cycle. So every time I go through a round of 12 steps, I go through a mystic cycle and I go through grieving cycles, all
Oh.
coincide. So that's all these cycles that we're all constantly going through. But mine, I get to like, I've done, like,